Hey y'all, MOON, that spells finale of
Yeah.
The Stand, the mini series 2020 to 2021. I got the book today because I actually have something I want to read from it for y'all. Don't worry, it won't be a total book reading session, but I gotta read from this for one of the comparisons that I want to make later on. But I am Chauncey K Robinson, aka Twisted CKR, and I am joined by my partner, Michael Damian, the comedian, the man, the legend, this guy.
Yeah.
And you all have pushed with us through this miniseries.
And we thank you.
And we thank you for that. It has been a ride. We have gone through a lot when it comes to, and maybe not enough when it comes to this show and what we have explored. But we are talking about the season finale of The Stand. And we are going to be talking about what we actually got. This was the episode that many of us have been talking about throughout, which was written by Stephen King and himself, the man, the legend, the writer, the author, the creator of this universe. And so he wrote this. So we have to kind of go from there with that. And then we're going to talk about the differences with the 90s version and also the differences with the book and some comparisons, and then kind of the overall thoughts. And, I want to pose a question to all of you here, which is basically, I want you to tell us in the chat and in the replay. Thank you all for who are joining us in the chat and the replay. Your thoughts on the episode and your thoughts on the overall of the season. And then also who out of everyone, this whole mini series, did you like the best? Who was your favorite character? And which character did you think should have gotten more attention throughout that didn't? I got some thoughts. I felt like they did my boy Nick real dirty this whole story. They did my boy Nick real dirty. Yeah, Nick and Tom got done real dirty for this retelling or adaptation of the show, of the story. And so we're going to get into it. So let us know. And we're going to, first of all, start with our overall thoughts, which is, what are your overall thoughts of this? Not that we'll talk about the whole series at the end, but Michael, what are your overall thoughts of this episode in particular?
Wow. It was weird because I really didn't like particular things about the episode. But in comparison to the miniseries, I really loved how this one was executed. I love the ending way better. It was truthful to the book. And it was, they kept, you could tell because King wrote it, thankfully, that it still had a little bit of signature King on it. Where like the characters were very good, and I loved how you could clearly tell Randall Flagg was developed in it. And I wanted this version of Randall Flagg from this episode that Stephen King knows too well to be the Flagg that should have been in Vegas. But I enjoyed it. It was new a little bit to me. But then I went back and, read the end of the book, and I loved it. I'm sorry, I'm tripping over my words here because I really am still processing how I feel about this episode. But I think overall, this episode had the same flavor that I was kind of expecting the rest of the show had, but it didn't. I waited the whole show for this. I know that was confusing, and I apologize.
No, it wasn't confusing. You make a lot of good points. I think we both were talking about how this was the episode where I actually really got to know Randall Flagg a lot better than we got for this whole, I don't know. I feel like, and that of course is because of the fact that it was Stephen King writing him. Stephen King, who understands the nature of who Randall Flagg is, the trickster, the one who lies, the one who puts on a big show, the big bravado man who has a lot of insecurities. And I feel like we got to really see that this episode. And I feel like they gutted him of that throughout the season, because I felt like they were trying to do a different spin on the Randall Flagg character instead of keeping with the way he was when things first started. So I don't know why they did that. I don't know what that was about, but I'm glad that we got to see a little bit of that. And it also kind of made me sad for what could have been when it came to the whole season, those little quips and things that he had when him and Frannie were talking to each other, the way he was holding, carrying himself. And it was just like, where was this for the entire series when we went to Flagg in Vegas, when Flagg was going to people and stuff like that. And it's just, DJ White is saying in the comment section, Stan is just limited miniseries adapt from novel and no season 2. Well, yeah, I mean, that's definitely what we got. Some people may be wondering with the end that we got, if there's going to be some type of continuation. And, Game of Thrones, when they had it, there's a whole thing of a prequel series coming out. There's a future series coming out. So it's not completely off the table that they could probably go further, especially with, we'll get into it, some of the things that Mother Abagail was telling Frannie in her dream. But, I feel like Stephen King added some stuff that wasn't there. We'll talk about that. And he also put some stuff in there that wasn't from the original book, wasn't in the 90s version, wasn't in the original book, but it was in the unabridged, uncut version, some parts. And some parts weren't, that I kind of wished he had put from the uncut version, that I kind of wish had made it into this episode. And we'll talk about that as well. So my overall thoughts of this episode was, it was good.
Yeah.
But it was still too subtle for my taste. I got so excited when I saw Randall come out of nowhere behind Frannie. I was like, okay, wait a minute. Are we opening something? Are we opening up for a season 2? Yeah. Are we going to get a whole new story? Maybe the continuation of what happens after the first stand? And I love that, but I still felt like it was an interesting concept to focus in on Frannie and not Stu. Once again, talking to the fact that Stu felt like he was very much a background character for this series, for this mini series, which I think was a missed opportunity with the character of Stu, and instead focusing on Frannie, who, thank you for joining us for the times that you have been here for us talking about the episodes, but she's not our fave when it comes to things. And that's because of certain interpretations of her throughout and the way she was written a little bit throughout this series. So it was kind of like, and so we're ending with her. Okay. So there's a lot of things to unpack there, but overall, I did not hate the ending.
No,
I thought it was fairly better than some of the other episodes, but I think, and we'll talk about the overall, I would have felt maybe there should have been a bigger kind of send off, as big as we could have gotten, given the explosion of last episode. And I don't know why they spend the time giving us like nearly a minute of a recap. If someone's watching, and it feels like it digs into the time they could be using on the story, because if someone's watching the 9th episode, they saw the 8th episode. You don't have to do a previously on here. That's just, Netflix doesn't do that. This is a streaming service. Believe you me, if someone's watching it on the streaming, it's okay. You could probably just kind of go straight into it. So that was a little technical thing that I felt, but I didn't hate it. I feel like overall episode 3 was still my favorite, and I don't think anything came above that episode. And I think this one was okay, but I think it could have been stronger in some cases. So, but I think you and I, Michael, both agreed that it was, okay. Penguin, who is joining us in chat. Thank you to all of you who are joining us in the chat and in the replay. And be sure to give this video a thumbs up and a like if you haven't already, and to subscribe if you have not already. Penguin is saying, still trying to decide how much I liked it. I guess I did like it, but felt like it could have been better. Something was missing. I think that's kind of the feeling.
That's why I was tripping over my words. Mm-hmm. I was like, I couldn't figure out how I liked it because, it's funny. Stephen King talks about how he can't write an ending. But the funny thing is he wrote a really good ending for a mediocre interpretation that he didn't have control of in the past. So that's what I thought was great overall about the show.
It's almost kind of sad because by looking at this episode, you see what could have been, those moments of fear. There was a lot of tension in this episode.
So good.
Because you don't know what's going to happen, with the whole thing of her being, I'm like, oh, this is actually kind of creepy. And I was like, if only we'd have had this kind of suspense throughout the whole series, they would have been a lot more, entertaining. JJ is saying in the chat, I thought Flagg was very different than the previous episodes. This Flagg was so much entertaining. Exactly. That's what I was like, oh my gosh, this Flagg is the Flagg we needed throughout this whole series. And we only got him, of course, when Stephen King steps in and is the one to write his dialogue, because Stephen King gets it. Stephen King, of course, because he created Randall Flagg. He understands the connection to him being the Dark Man and what he is, the bigger one. And you almost feel like the writers of the main series or adaptation, I don't know if they didn't do their homework, if they didn't sink as deep into these characters as they could have, because there were a lot of characters, like their love for this Harold character who had no significance on the second half of the bigger story of all this, got so much attention, and it's lost so many other characters that were so much connected to the bigger picture that Stephen King clearly had in mind for this story.
Yeah, it was interesting how it became Frannie's story overall.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in an ensemble cast of characters, Frannie winds up being the main character this entire time.
Well, actually, Frannie and Harold. It was Harold for the first half, and then became Frannie for the second. And you kind of get it after the fact, because we know that we followed them in the beginning, right? And what they had dealt with when everything went to crap. Those were the two we got focused on, and a little bit of Stu. So I guess in the overall, if this was a show where you could watch it all in one, it would kind of make sense that the two of them are the focal point. But knowing the story itself, it's kind of like they didn't need to be the only focal point. DJ White is saying in the chat, you are surprised that Randall Flagg used finger gun and killed one of the natives in episode 9. That was actually a very cool
was.
I think I highlighted this because once again, it plays into the very cool aspect of Randall Flagg, the playfulness of this character, the playfulness and the insidious and the sinister nature, the duality of it with this character that we really didn't get when it came to the overall, development of this character, I felt like. So, okay, let's get into what actually happened this episode. And then, because I do want to dive into what went on and the comparisons and the overall story, because I'm sure all of you in the chat and those of you who are watching in the replay have your feelings, your frustrations, your thoughts, the things you wish you could have seen that we did not see. So, okay, so for those of you who are watching, I put up a picture of Randall Flagg with a little bit more of a trimmed beard in this one than the beard he was rocking for most of the series. He looks a little bit more relaxed. He doesn't have a shirt on this one. He's just in the jean. And this is after Frannie, he has manipulated it so Frannie has fallen into the well. And we'll get to this, but this was kind of the main focus, right? This thing between there still being a battle going on of good and evil in the universe. And we're also going to talk about some Stephen King Easter eggs that were there to the bigger picture that we saw that build into the Stephen King universe that there is, for those of you who are interested in that and those of you who might be new to the Stephen King universe. Because I feel like if nothing else, maybe this will get people to maybe read some of his books a bit more, or some of his others, even watch some of his other stories that have been adapted, because there's some really great stories out there. And even though this, in my opinion, wasn't the best adaptation, maybe it'll wet people's whistle to, as they say, to see other adaptations that really went to it. So, okay. So what we got was the opening, where we have it so that it's also kind of flashbacky, which is what they did in the first.
It's basically Sarah Connor. Like 7.8 million people died, and I can't wait to tell you the truth. Should I tell you all of it? Like, it was almost verbatim a Terminator 2 setup. Yeah.
JJ is letting us know about Skarsgård's behind. And this is the episode for you who also wants to know. I know we had a previous chats where we talked about Skarsgård's butt. And this is another episode for those of you who are fans of Skarsgård's butts.
And Marston in a pair of jeans, too. That was out there for everybody, too.
It was.
Yeah.
So like you said, she's doing a kind of Sarah O'Connor kind of thing, telling her baby. We get we find out that her child was sick, but then inherited the immunity part from Frannie and came out of it. So we got that. There was the whole debate of whether or not to put her child out of the misery, but she just kind of held on to it. She kind of mentions Glenn and how Glenn might have had a different thought process, but she decided to push through with it. Glenn being the one who died last episode, who was a little bit more, the professor, the one who had a little bit more of an analytical kind of thought process of things. And the baby pulls through, and she named the baby Abagail because the baby is a girl, which we'll talk about which is a little bit different from the book. And I can't remember off the top of my head if it's different from the 90s version, but I know it's different from the book that she had a girl first, which is the baby of her and her ex-boyfriend, who happened to be Black. So the first baby born of the new world is a mixed race kid, Black baby. Let's give it up for progress. I'm playing around. But okay, so we have the baby, and then they go to the vigil. Frannie is the one who is kind of the symbolic, the one left from the crisis leadership that was involved, before everything went, the crap and everything like that. She's kind of not wanting to go. She kind of wants to just stay on her own. It's been about a couple of months, perhaps. And then basically we hear Kojak's barking. Kojak barks. Kojak is still doing well. He shows up with Stu and Tom. So Stu basically comes out, and I want you to, Michael, to talk about, you kind of predicted this, that Stu would just kind of show up, that we were not going to get the thing I wanted to see, which was Tom nursing Stu back to health. We did not get that.
Yeah, no, there's not at all. There's a gigantic thing that is left out. And once again, this show should not have only been 9 episodes. It should have been at least 3 to 5 seasons if you really wanted to stretch it out. It's a long book, but there is a point in the story where Tom is coming back from Vegas and he runs into Stu, and Stu is about to die. And it's unsure if it's like either Captain Trips or it's, his leg is really messed up. But Stu is brought to a cabin by Tom, and Tom is he kind of doesn't know what to do. So he sees Nick again in a dream, and Nick reunites with Tom, and that kind of gives Tom the urge to survive and also to bring back Stu. That would have been fantastic. But I was telling Chauncey over here last week that, the way this show loves to trim the fat in the unfortunate way of emotional character development, it's not a user-friendly show to get into. You have to know the material to get into this show. And that's unfair to the new viewer and to us who were diehard fans of such a great job of such a great story left in the hand of feeble-minded writers. And there's a whole thing, and I'm like, okay, they're just gonna cut to Kojak and cut to Stu and Tom showing up in Boulder. We're not gonna see any of that because the writers can't find the value in this, unfortunately, and they needed that. And it just wasn't like, okay, cool, he showed up, but there's no journey at all. And half of the battle in this whole franchise series is the journey. And it's gone. They cut it out. They even did that in the pilot episode where we find out that Stu and Frannie get together and Harold's upset, but we don't know why. They don't let anything grow in this entire show. And that was what is missing. We just have to assume that happened. And, this happened? Okay, we'll accept that.
Well, I think it goes back to what we were saying early on in this series, that we had hope wouldn't be the case throughout it, which was there was a lot of telling and not showing. There was a lot of things where characters told you how they felt instead of you seeing it in their actions. Character told you that things happened before and you didn't get to actually get it. And, JJ in the chat is referencing the ghost scene that, Michael was just talking about when it came to the thing, which is basically what it is that what happens is that Stu hurts his leg. Tom comes across him and Kojak take him to a cabin and nurse him back to health. But this is the thing. Tom doesn't know how to read, right? So he doesn't know what medicine to give him. And this is where Nick's ghost comes into play, who can speak in everything in Tom's dream, and it explains to him, takes him away, and explains to him how he's supposed to help bring Stu back to health. And that's what happened. So you get a nice, beautiful moment between Tom and Nick in this scene because of the fact that we saw their connection. You get a thing of Nick not just being, being told that keep getting told that Nick is Mother Abagail's voice and he's so important, and then he just becomes an afterthought, which is all the things that happened in this episode. We never get a reoccurrence of Nick at all. Nick is there. We never get to hear his voice, anything like that, which is what we got in the 90s version. And also just to see him again and seeing his power, the fact that even after death, like we got to see Mother Abagail in this episode, Nick lives on somewhere. And I think this talks to what we were talking about last episode, which the idea that there seems to be a downplaying of spirituality, of religion in this adaptation, to the point where it kind of lessens or dampens the impact of the storytelling. Because I know you have to explain where Nick comes from and how is he able to exist, but maybe you don't. Maybe you just leave that open to interpretation instead of completely cutting it out that Nick is just gone and we don't know where he went. And I don't understand why they went that route with that. And I was very disappointed to just hear Stu go up to Frannie and be like, Tom saved my life. And it's like no explanation when there's actually a very significant part of how Tom steps up. We got shortchanged of Tom this whole series, and we got shortchanged of Nick. The two people that brought the heart to this story, we got gutted of them.
Yeah, we did. I was going to say something, but I forgot what. It just doesn't make sense. And it's kind of heartbreaking to see how good of a job Stephen King did. And it had to be on the 9th and final episode. I don't know. It was like, I know CBS has great writers, but like, where were they on this? And if you take I know what it was. If you take the spirituality out of it, it doesn't make sense at all. Like the poster on CBS All Access, about to be Paramount Plus, I believe. They have the crucifix on the poster from a telephone pole that Flagg is literally standing next to, and then they mention crucifying people. They show crucifying people, like the aftermath of it. And that is a very religious element, even to the point where the very last shot, the very last scene of this whole thing plays into the Eurocentric religious aspect of a white person who's taller than the average people in the indigenous tribe. And therefore he's automatically a god, worship me. Like, you have all that, but you take it out of the American aspect of it. It doesn't make sense. And I'm sorry. Like, I'm passionate. You're muted.
I was muted, guys. I was muted. And Michael, check the private chat. I was saying that it was a thing where, they gutted it of the spirituality in the main part of it, and didn't seem to want to do that towards the end. And I understand also why for this final one, Stephen King probably didn't insert as much more into it as he could have, because he was probably like, well, they already set the precedent for all this stuff. It'd be crazy for me to do a dump of it all back into the final episode. So he was kind of put into a corner of his own story, so he could only insert a little bit more of the spirituality than of what he could without kind of offsetting everything that was shown before in this miniseries. So there's that. And I feel like, I just felt like when I thought about it, I was like, oh my gosh, they really shortchanged Nick. I kept thinking once Nick passed, I'm like, okay, it's okay. We're going to see him later on. And even when we didn't see Tom for a minute, I was like, okay, we're going to see Tom later on. That's cool. And it was just like Tom shows up with Stu. He sends them off kind of crying, Frannie and Stu. And that's it. I'm like, wow, really? That's it? Tom, I mean, we only get a reference of the bravery that Tom has, and we never get Tom to be able to tell his story of how Nick came to him. It seemed really weird. Damon Robinson in the chat is saying they didn't show really any spirituality until tonight.
Yeah.
And Vera is saying, thanks for joining us in the chat, Vera. Too much time on heroin. That's what I was saying too. I just felt like they spent so much time on heroin the first half that they kind of shortchanged all the other characters. And then for the second half, they decided to focus in on Frannie. And then, of course, Larry had his big moment last episode, but it really was hollow in comparison to it. And, Farrah saying, yeah, taking the religion and magic out of it makes it dull. Yep. Damon saying, so there's another season or something. And was the healer girl in the book? I think that's also something we have to talk about, which we will. Oh, and I want people to kind of give us their thoughts. Do y'all think there's going to be a season 2? Let us know in the chat and in the replay, because I kind of think there won't be, because the ending with Flagg is actually in the unabridged version, which we have here. Pretty cool. It's in the unabridged version. Now that stuff with Frannie, not so much. That stuff with Frannie is not in the book. I think that's new stuff. That's definitely not in the 90s version, and it's not in the book as far as I have seen. So.
And it's weird because I like Frannie better in this the entire time than the rest of the show, or even the original King miniseries. Because I think can we talk about that one now, or are we waiting till later?
Or you can. Yeah. We'll go deeper into it later, but yeah.
Because the first one, the miniseries, ends with Gary Sinise, Lieutenant Dan, and Molly Ringwald from the Brat Pack. Molly just had her kid, and it's like, oh my God, it's a shame. They do bring that up about it's only my child in here and there should be more, but I think it is also cool how they brought up another child and they did the comparison between her baby had Captain Trips, but was healed of it. And the 2 immune parents didn't, yield a, diseased child. And I really liked everything they added in here, even to the point where we watched Gerald's Game not too long ago, which is an outstanding King adaptation. And this reminded me of that because it was very simplified and the stakes felt even higher than the rest of the show. Yeah, we had Vegas versus Boulder, but the more intimate it became, the stakes felt higher in this episode than the one with the nuke going off.
Yeah, it definitely, some stuff was definitely intensified this episode. I think that's because of Stephen King's, mastery when it comes to it. And, people are, showing some in the chat, explaining also highlighting some of the differences. Like Larry had a baby too in the 90s version. I believe he had Lisa who never was seen in this version. He ended up having a child Larry's child was supposed to be part of the new Boulder. So that was a thing that did not end up happening at all. And, like others are saying, Matt C in the chat is saying, Tom had to say goodbye to Nick. And now tonight he had to say goodbye to Stu, Frannie, and Kojak. Tough deal. I honestly don't know why Stu thought he was right. Well, I guess because Kojak stayed with him. Okay, sure. Because at first I'm like, why did he get to stay with Tom? But I get it. Kojak had to go with someone, and he probably, got to know Stu a lot, and he stayed with Stu throughout. And Nick Paul is saying in the chat, only if Stephen King writes it in terms of a season 2, as the writer was asking. And so I think that's definitely, to me, I was just like, we really got shortchanged on Nick and Tom up to that point. And when I saw that wasn't happening, I was very disappointed. So then we move on and, fast forward to sometime after Stu comes in, they're all dancing. It seems like a nice little time in the square, blah, blah, blah. And we see that Frannie is feeling that she wants to leave. Frannie and Stu have a talk where they kind of talk about what really happens in a society, right? The repeat that goes on, Frannie saying, she kind of wants to see Maine again. And Stu is pointing out that he feels like, the way he feels is that there is things are changing. You know, someone got arrested for disorderly conduct. Someone, you know, two people are sitting in jail right now. And this actually happens in the book too, where Stu has these observations about society, where he is saying that Boulder's kind of, you know, it's not loud like the city just yet, but it's getting there. So they basically want seclusion, which I want to know what you thought about that, Michael, because I mean, my initial thought process is like, okay, so are you going to move every time more people move into an area? Because that's just how society is. Things aren't always going to be a new utopia. No one told you it was going to be, but now you guys want to move after you have the safety or saferness. That's not a word, but it's safer in Boulder. And you want to go out on the terrain, not knowing what could be out there. And you've got a newborn baby. So what are your thoughts on that?
I have a perspective. I hope it's relatable. I from the age 14 to 24, I lived out in the boondocks. I lived in the country of Tennessee, and where Walmart was a 20-minute drive. And I know that. And, you know, what you were talking about, why would you, if you just had a newborn child with your now husband, why would you move away from all of the resources that you have? Your kid is going to grow up basically to be John Wayne Gacy, because he grew up knowing nobody on a farm except his family. And that psycho killer turned out okay in the 50s. But I just think that is a terrible idea to move back to Maine all the way across the country. And it's also a little bit of selfishness from Frannie's part, because did she ask Stu if he wanted to go visit West Texas or East Texas? He didn't ask. It was all about Frannie this entire time. Stu went with Frannie. He loved her, but also maybe he got away because he was like a simple-minded guy from Texas, and he's like, I'm easily persuadable. But I guess I bring up the whole Tennessee thing to where you shouldn't raise a kid in seclusion, away from resources, away from medication, away from society, away from school. They're going to be the only people there in a land of rotten flesh. And, you know, that smell in the air is just not going to be good. Like, it could breed more diseases. Nobody cleaned up Maine. And yeah, it's going to be spacious, but there's going to be more corpses. And also the Walking Dead rule. How is it guaranteed that moving from Boulder, Colorado to the name in Maine that I'm going to butcher, how do you know you're not going to run into raiders anymore? And it's just unnecessary. And I didn't feel bad for Frannie anymore. And I was like, okay, all this is on you now.
Yeah, I definitely, I see your point when it comes to that, because at first I was like, I get it. You know, we've all, I mean, whatever this is and things like that, you know, we've all had those feelings of, oh my gosh, the city, there's so much crime in the city, and I just want the simplicity of the countryside. But this is also during a time where like 78%, like 78, like she said, 78 million people are dead.
99%.
Yeah, 99% caught it and are dead. You don't know what's going on outside of there. Some people made it to Boulder, but there may be some people deciding that they want to do lawlessness in other places. And here you are, like, you know, we got 2 people already in jail and 1 person for disorderly conduct. We need to go across the country. And it's just like, that is just so weird to me. You know, Lily Mack in the chat is saying, so agree. What a stupid thing to do, leaving. They could have just moved out into the country, not safe. Exactly. Yes. They could have moved, like you just said, Michael, they could have moved a few miles down, like, hey guys, we're going to get a cabin, but we'll come back from time to time. But we really just kind of want to do our own thing kind of outside of where things are right now. And I feel like they kind of made it so Frannie was sort of, I felt like Dolph does protest too much, as they say in Shakespeare, where they kept making her kind of explain why it was okay for them to leave. She was like, well, there's going to be risk everywhere. We just faced off with the back bad of Randall Flagg. I mean, hey, anywhere's going to be a risk. So let's just go. They had her say that multiple times, as though to kind of drive it home that it was totally not ridiculous that they were leaving civilization to go across country with themselves and their dog and a newborn baby, which was just kind of like, okay, and yeah, it just seemed a little haphazard to me. I do understand a little. I felt I understood a bit from Stu's perspective a little bit more, where it was the idea of saying, things are kind of going, because, one of the things we saw, they didn't really explain it, but the watchmen there were getting guns now. So you had an armed police force kind of starting there. We saw that. And that's also something that's mentioned in the book. So you have these moments where it's like, are things going to go back to exactly what we just came out of, in the sense of the ills of society? And do we want to stick around for that? So I kind of understood that from Stu's perspective. I felt like Frannie was just more on I just don't want to be here anymore. So it just wasn't as convincing to me. I felt like this is what I mean when who they choose to focus on can really drive a story, or it can stifle a story. And I feel like had they done it a little bit more from Stu's perspective, of him being a man of morals and things like that, of why he being older of also than Frannie, and having seen a lot more, having the know-how to say, yeah, maybe we should go somewhere else. Maybe not as far as Maine, but somewhere else. Penguin is saying in the chat, agree, Michael, the Maine move makes no sense. I do think in the book, Stu said he had no desire to ever go back to Arnett. So yeah, maybe Stu didn't want to actually go back to Texas, but they still didn't necessarily have to,
I was
where
mainly,
it was.
Yeah, I was mainly talking about from like, if I was in their shoes situation, like I wouldn't move halfway across the country and be like, you know what? Boulder is the only town with people in it. Why don't we go like maybe 5 miles down that way, check it out. And then we can always just inch back 5, 10. We don't have to buy a home anymore. We can just walk into one. And I understand missing the Atlantic, but I've never been to Maine, but I'm from Florida, and like go there, like you can swim in that water and not get cold. But I'm glad they didn't decide to go down to the Gulf of Mexico where there are no waves at all. So yeah, I don't know. And I'm thinking, doesn't it get cold in Maine? And
yeah, they're gonna have to deal with a winter, but they dealt with winter in Boulder too.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't think it's so much that. It's just like, why so far from everybody? But I get it. And Sabeti in the chat is saying that in 90 Virginia, they do mention that they choose to go back to Maine. Yeah. This one we got a little bit more of a drawn out journey of them heading back to Maine. Cool. Which was fine. But I guess what I'm saying is that the explanation for it to me didn't hold as much conviction from Frannie's POV than had they said it more from Stu's. And I just think Stu is a more convincing character in that regard.
Here is the other thing, and this goes into the traveling and the biblical perspective, because the one biblical thing they did leave in here was the fact that Frannie was going to have 5 kids, right? Been a way less creepy Adam and Eve situation if this family's all alone in Maine, as opposed to there's more options and less blue blood situation if you stayed in Maine and developed relationships there. If you catch my drift.
Yeah, I mean, the other idea is that as the people in Boulder have kids, those kids might grow up and be like, Mom, Dad, I'm gonna bounce, I'm gonna see the rest of the world. I'm gonna set up, like how it did when it first started the country, right? Yeah. After they stole the land, which was basically they started settling other places.
It's in reverse this time.
Yeah, people expanded. So that's bound to happen. I guess maybe Fran and Stu felt like that they were going to do it different and be the first ones to expand. But yes, like you said, if she's supposed to have so many kids, it's like, well, are they going to meet some more people along the way? We don't know.
Are they going to blue blood it? Are they moving back?
I don't think they're going to blue blood it. But yeah, there's definitely some aspect of a question there, right? Like how is that gonna work?
Like, wait a minute, this is Adam and Eve or Cain, Abel, and Seth. Like this is, and then if you want to leave out Lilith involved, I don't know. But I'm just like, you leave out some Bible parts, but you put in others. It's another critique I have on this whole thing.
Yeah, exactly. And so we get them deciding to move. They take Kojak with them, and then we get a flash to the wreckage of Vegas, and we see
That
the
was cool.
infamous Happy Smile pin that it looked like it had X's on it, and that Randall Flagg was dead, but then it changes to a smile again. And so that's our key of knowing he's not totally dead, which I was very excited to see. I was
Yeah,
like,
that was
oh,
cool.
what does that mean? Are we
Yeah.
going to get more Randall Flagg here? That's really awesome. So I appreciated that little callback to the wreckage of Vegas, because I wasn't sure what we were going to see in Vegas when they went back to the wreckage, but it was cool to see that we saw Randall Flagg's happy smile face. And then, we see, like I said, in Boulder, there's a mural of Abagail, Mother Abagail and stuff like that. They, decide to move. So then we basically get them coming to we get them on the road kind of doing stuff or whatever, a cute little montage, and then they go up to a house, and the house has a turtle in it, which is very significant for those of you who know the Stephen King universe, what the turtle means. And I'll get into that when we talk about the Stephen King universe and this miniseries place in it. But there's a turtle and there's an empty home, and basically Kojak notices the tall grass, which is also the tall grass could also be seen as a reference to another Stephen King short story, the tall grass, which is a very awesome Netflix movie that everyone should check out. In the Tall Grass is an awesome movie. I love it. And so in the tall grass, and he's noticing something. There's a little black baby doll. He grabs the little black baby doll. We see there's a little black baby doll, so cute. And then there's a hand that comes out and pulls it back, and it's like, what? And then we get a flash into the middle of the tall grass or the cornfield, and it's a young girl sitting there, young black girl sitting there, and she is like saying stuff, and she's like, oh, a baby teething, like she can hear things. Yeah. And so there's that. And so flash forward to Stu going out to basically run some errands, and Frannie staying back to take care of the baby, Abagail. And she comes across she sees a water spout thingy, and she decides, I want some water. And I'm gonna crawl a little bit on this rainy stick thingy, okay, and get some water. And I'm not going to wait for Stu to get back just in case something happens. No, because Kojak don't got hands. Okay. He can't help me. But Frannie decides to do this. She does not have the walkie-talkie close to her that Stu wanted her to keep close to her. And if for anyone who has a family or relative that never answers their cell phone when you call them, and Damon Robinson and I have this with our mother, where we want her to always be close to her phone when we call, and she never is, but we love her anyway. Hi. And she's not there. And so basically a very, very cool moment of tension happened to me, because we had Stu with the tire, and we had Frannie with the thing. And because this was a new kind of thing that hadn't been seen in the 90s version, and I don't think there's a significant scene of it in the book, I didn't know what they were going to do. I didn't know if Stu was about to bite the bullet or if Fran was about to die. What did you think about that new scene, especially when Randall Flagg ended up coming out and being like, hi, bitch. Hi, Frannie.
Oh, my God.
And then the rat, and then her falling in. What did you think? I just thought that whole sequence was really well done. I'll give them that, because the tension was there for me. I was like, oh my gosh, are they about to kill Stu? Is it a red herring that we're watching Frannie, and then something happens to Stu? It was just so much tension there where I was like, whoa, what are they about to rewrite here? Because they never tell us, we don't really know what happens necessarily when they leave Boulder. We just know they made it to Maine, or maybe they could switch that up or whatnot in the book. So what did you think of that?
I really enjoyed it. I was like, oh shit, what are we gonna do? Like, it's like, hi, bitch. And oh yeah, Children of the Corn too. I was thinking that as well. He who walks among the rows. Right on. But yeah, I was like, what? At first I was screaming, like, you would think that being a country boy that Stu Redman is, he would tell Frannie, hey, don't walk on boards over giant holes, especially wells that you don't know anything about. that wood could be rotten. And I was like, Frannie, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? I thought Flagg coming in like, hey, Frannie, hey, bitch. And then just a hey, bitch is just a great introductory line for any character and made me love Flagg even more. And that I didn't know Stu was going to make it.
Yeah, I
didn't either.
I mean, maybe that's just my connection to Stu over Frannie, but I was honestly more concerned for Stu than I was for. I was like, Frannie, she's probably gonna fall or something, whatever. But let's hope this thing that nobody comes out of nowhere and like shoots Stu or he gets captured. I mean, maybe it would be a whole new season, but I was like, I hope nothing happens to Stu. And then that whole thing with the rat. Or as Damon is saying, he thought it was a squirrel. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was a rat. And so the rat comes out. I was like, ooh, that caught me off guard. And then she basically falls into the well. And I thought that was a very, very cool scene.
It's a callback.
To what?
To the rats are in the sewers.
Oh, yeah. The rats are in the sewers. It's a callback to when the Larry in New York City.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really like that part because I will give them that. It was new to me because I didn't know what was going to happen, especially if you know the book and stuff. It was an added kind of scene. So you don't know what's actually going on. And then we get her in the forest with Randall Flagg himself. The dark man himself is back and he's chilled and he's happy and he's kind of a trickster. And I love it. I got Loki vibes from him as Loki is played, if those of you know Marvel and things like that. So I really just like the whole interaction. So we basically got them talking. He gives a little nod to the indigenous people who weren't even affected by the plague, as he explains it, and then basically what we got was him basically telling Frannie, you might die, you don't know what's going on, and also that truck may land on Stu, so I can help you out. I'm in a benevolent feeling. All you need to do is give me a kiss and I'll heal you, and I just need to check through your eyes from time to time. So basically he's kind of seeming like he's saying he wants to somewhat possess Frannie in some regards, kind of give her a way of that. Now, why he wants to do that, I'm not sure. Why he's deciding it has to be Frannie to go through necessarily, especially when it's kind of like, well, at this point, we don't know where he is in the world. We know he's inside somewhere and he's just like, we could talk about whether or not I'm dead later, you know, or whatever. And so he wants to do that. And at first, I honestly thought they were going to have Frannie do it. I thought that would have made her a bit more interesting had she done it, because I would have been like, okay, here's season 2. But she eventually decides, not even for myself, not even if you were God himself. So she basically sticks to it. She bites his lip. She runs off. She meets up with Mother Abagail, who basically gives her the prophecy of telling her that she's going to have 5 kids, they're going to have 20 kids, and they're going to have 70, and so on and so forth. So she's going to help replenish the earth. And so eventually, you know, what did you think about that we saw Mother Abagail in her actual home? Particular one, because it was an old folks home that they ended up getting her from. Nick and Tom ended up originally getting her from an old folks home, and we all wondered, was she always on this old folks home? We thought that she was actually in her actual home, but that wasn't the case in this miniseries. But it seemed like in her dream she was in her actual home. So what did you think of that whole sequence? Like Abagail having known what, you know, how he had tried to tempt her and all this other stuff.
Oh yeah, I'm glad it finally happened. It brought back some of the magic of the original miniseries, and because King was at the helm, I'm really glad that Mother Abagail was back at her original house, which I had a theory going into episode 3 that when we were talking about episode 3, when Tom and Nick found the poster with the King cameo in it, go back and check that one out. I had an idea, or maybe it was just a funny thought, like, hey, what if before Captain Trips happened, or as Captain Trips was happening, nobody could take care of Mother Abagail anymore? So they took her from her house and they placed her in this home that she didn't want to be in.
That would explain why she wasn't too happy in being there when they first found her, because she wasn't on her land, which she had been on for most of her life. So we got that. And I like that. I like the fact that Mother Abagail, so I don't know if we needed really Mother Abagail to tell her that she was going to have a whole bunch of kids or anything like that. Though. I thought it was all right. I just kind of have an issue with Frannie being the mother of civilization. Maybe because I'm not really feeling her character like that. And I'm like, that's a lot to place on this one person when other people are having babies too. So
I just don't want the whole entire population of Maine to be inbred. Like,
yeah. Well, we still have Boulder and people having kids in Boulder. So there's that. And then we basically, we get the thing of her, we get back in time. Stu gets to her, doesn't know what's going on. And we have the little black girl there, the little girl. She's cute. She has the baby already. She's nursing the baby with the bottle and she's taking care of it. And then she basically helps Stu pull Frannie from the well. And she knows Stu's name. She seems very efficient for a little girl, very knowledgeable. And she also, heals Frannie. We literally see her heal Frannie. And that was very significant to me in a good and bad way. I love the fact that the whole interaction with Stu and the little girl, he was like, "Who are you?" Okay, sure. And it's like, "How do you know my name?" And she's like, "Stu, give me room." And I think you had said it when we saw it, where you were like, "Okay, is this like Generation Z or Mother Abagail?"
It was. Yeah, I'm standing by it. I think it was
Generation Z or Mother Abagail, which was kind of interesting to me. I was just like, I was kind of thrown off. I was kind of thrown off by it, though. I liked the addition, but I also kind of felt like it was, what do you call it when something's there to just kind of automatically fix the problem, like Deus Machina or something?
Deus Machina?
Deus Machina, where it's just like, okay, in order for her to heal, we need someone there to be able to heal her. So let's have Mother Abagail reincarnated, who is for some reason living in the grass and is able to come out to heal Frannie after what Flagg did. And I was just like, that it's kind of random. And then she disappears. And honestly, in my notes, I wrote magical Negro and how I'm tired of that trope. I am so tired of the magical Negro trope. I honestly was thinking maybe this little girl lost her family and she was going to be part of the new generation or something that was maybe people with powers or something like that. And then she just disappears after she serves her purpose to healing Frannie. And I was like, we got to get away from these tropes where the only purpose of a black character with some powers is to help out the white leads. I was just a little tired of that. I was just like, a lot of that. There's so much potential for this little girl, and then she just disappears. Are we ever going to see her again? Who is she? But like you said, it's probably Mother Abagail reincarnated. But I'm like, how is that even possible? We're doing reincarnation. So is Mother Abagail not just, is she kind of like Randall Flagg?
Yeah, maybe Mother Abagail embodied herself into that girl, or who was already living in the tall grass, because she had a tent and everything. She had her own little setup there. She was a survivalist. And it's either one or two things. Mother Abagail embodied herself as a little girl in the spiritual form, because at first Mother Abagail in the entire series went from, I'm a woman who is a messenger of God, I'm not really God, to the end of the show, Mother Abagail is all-knowing and all-powerful and knows that Frannie is going to have like 20 grandchildren. Or 20 children and then 70 grandchildren.
Yeah. But, yeah, and Frannie and Penguin is saying in the chat, Frannie's stand was really good. She may have bit Flagg, but she was really kicking the devil in the balls. And I agree with that. That was her. Great. That was Frannie's version of her stand, right? Because everyone kind of made their stand except Stu. Stu was the only one that wasn't really allowed to make a stand, even though he was supposed to be the one that was supposed to lead. And then, anyway. So, Stu kind of got shortchanged in that, but Frannie got to make a stand. And maybe that's just the idea of it being 2021, not leaning it all on the male characters, which is why we got Ralph changed to Ray. And then, we get Frannie getting a lot more autonomy when it comes to, or agency when it comes to some of the decisions, as opposed to when Molly Ringwald played her in the 90s, where she was a bit more spoiled in the sense of being frantic and not wanting Stu to fulfill his destiny and stuff like that. So I think and Penguin is saying in the chat that the cross she wore implied it was Mother A. Yeah, I definitely agree it was Mother A. It just doesn't make no sense to me.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's in, I don't think that's in the book. I didn't see that in the book. And it definitely wasn't in the 90s version. So it's kind of like, why the addition of that? Does that mean that Mother Abagail is some bigger player in it all? And that would be cool. But at the same time, is she just kind of living in the grass to kind of be there as their guardian angel? Like Mother Abagail plays this part. Can't she do more than just help out Frannie?
Can't she do it? Like, can
she do it herself?
Yeah.
Like, why does she need Frannie to be the one to do it? Why didn't Mother Abagail? You know what I mean? Like, it's kind of, it's like, I didn't like it. I was just like, I liked the little girl, but I just didn't like that trope being used once again. And Give Me Shelter saying the magical Negro trope. I like Stephen King a lot, but he is notorious for this. Remember Green Mile and The Shining? Exactly. And it's just kind of like he wrote an episode and he somehow got a way to put it in even more with Mother Abagail again, reincarnated as a little girl living in the grass to just be there to save Frannie. And I'm like, what? Like, okay, but maybe that was like their duality. Maybe Mother Abagail is something of a symbolization of the turtle that we'll talk about, and that, and that she's always maybe going to be at odds with a Randall Flagg, because Randall Flagg was able to kind of influence Frannie to make her fall in. So maybe then, because he did that, Mother Abagail was able to come out and help Frannie save herself, because Randall Flagg had intervened on that part. So the rules let it so she could intervene to help out. Something like that. I don't know. It just didn't make much sense. It kind of just seemed out of nowhere. Vera is saying in the chat, I guess Stuart Stan was not killing himself. Yeah, maybe that was his stand, just kind of surviving. Give Me Shelter saying, I'm still curious as to why Stu in the book and the series built up to be the foil to Flagg, but was utterly useless in the end. Yeah. I feel like, and I want to talk about it a little bit with the book, is that I feel like he plays a little bit more of a moral compass than he was allowed to play in this series. So we'll talk about that in a little bit.
That is also a trope that is used a lot. Like it's like a misdirection. Like, you think that Stu's going to be the leader of the group, but then it shifts because everybody else in the group finds leadership in their own ways. Like, there's a musical that did this called The Book of Mormon. You think like the lead guy is going to be like Elder Price is going to be the guy to change humanity for the better, for God, but it's actually his bumbly sidekick who becomes the savior of everything. So that is used in more things than not. I do agree that I wish Stu had a better part in it, although I would think that his stand was surviving the old world, because he was trapped in a military base when all this was going on.
Yeah.
And he brought the good of the old world into post-Captain Trips America.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's implied a little bit by Stu being his authentic self, that in itself, and him raising a new generation of children, that hopefully he'll instill in them that moral compass he has. I just feel like when it came to some of the major parts of the story, he wasn't allowed to shine as much as he could have, even in this ending part where he was supposed to, in a way, shine. But of course, Stephen King wrote this ending, so maybe he just decided he wanted Frannie to be the one to have more of the epiphany than he originally had Stu be the one to kind of have the epiphany in the unabridged book. So, we get this thing where basically they eventually make it to, I was going to say Boulder. They eventually make it to Maine. And, finally, because I guess in the whole week that it took, Stu never asked her what happened. And that's the moment when he chooses to ask her, what was that going on down there? And, she talks about what Mother Abagail told her about the will and the will of life, and the fact that it always turns and it kind of ends up where it is, which the will is another reference to the Stephen King universe and some bigger themes that he has that run throughout his stories that we'll talk about. And so, the idea is be true, stand. And we got the little girl version of Mother Abagail telling Frannie to stand. And so there's kind of this idea that we're left with of it never ends. The story keeps going. There is no ending necessarily. There's always going to be hate. There's always going to be evil. There's always going to be good. And so you just keep being true. You keep taking a stand no matter what, as they are away from Boulder, away from everybody. So it's really contradictory there. They kind of left, instead of helping civilization move forward, they decided to move away from it, but they're being true on the other side of the country to themselves, I guess, and standing. So we got that. And you kind of think it's going to be over. And I'm so glad it wasn't completely over, because I would have been like, okay, snooze fest a little bit.
Yep.
But we got something else, which was Randall Flagg showing up on the indigenous land that he had talked about to Frannie earlier, naked, for those of you who are fans of the Skarsgård, but we got full view of it. And he was there, and he basically does the finger shoot, which was very, very cool. And awesome. They basically worship him. He basically I don't know if reincarnated is right. I guess he just gets to kind of come back, and he has a new place where he is going to, I guess, lead these other people to who knows what. He's going to do something. So it's not the end of Randall Flagg. He is not dead. He's taking his own stand in a way. And I do want to point out what Mother Abagail called him. And I think we can call this canon in a way, because Stephen King wrote this episode where Mother Abagail calls him, he does what his father does. And I feel like she was calling Flagg the son of the devil. Yeah. So he is, I think, because, there was a little bit of debate. Is he a demon? Is he a magician like we see in the Dark Tower? Is he just, what is he necessarily? And we get a sense that he is. Now, Stephen King has pretty much told us, I think, definitely that he is the son of the devil. What did you think of that final scene?
I loved it. It left me with a ton of refrigerator questions, which are, questions you have after you watch a movie and you're like, oh, wait a minute, you're by the fridge, you're pouring your cup of OJ, and it's like, I have a question about this. That's what a refrigerator question is. I loved it. I thought it was way better than the sappy, all is good. Oh, man, there should have been more of us in that little hospital thing. Like, I enjoyed this because it stuck clear to the message that you can try to be good. There will always be good and evil. It all depends on what stand you take. And I thought it was perfect because Randall Flagg, at the end of the day, is a supernatural, otherworldly entity. And he's not going to be killed by man-made weapons such as a superbug or an atomic weapon. And I loved that he went true to his ancient colonial evil of showing up as the tall white guy taking advantage of an indigenous population, which is what happened in the past. A bunch of white guys showing up thinking that they're God and they retain control over people who are 2 feet smaller than them. And I thought it was wild. It was definitely a twist I did not see coming in this show, having not read the book in over a decade. I thought it was great. It showed another way of how this man is evil.
Yeah, and I think we can use this to segue over into a little bit, segue over into the book talk and what was in the book and what was in the 90s version, because clearly this was not in the 90s version. We do not see Randall Flagg. I mean, what we see in the 90s version is that when Vegas gets blown up, Flagg basically changes into a crow before it burns up and he flies off. So that scene right there in the 90s version lets you know he survived because he left before it happened. In this version, as in the book, we see that he basically, he basically is changed and shows up somewhere else. And as people are saying in the chat and have said, it's no longer Flagg, it's Russell Forday. So, there's a bit of a change. It's one of his many, if people know this character inside the books and things like that, it's one of his many aliases or his different names. It always seems to be RF initials, but it's one of his many names. And the picture that I am showing is one of the original photos that's actually shown in the unabridged version, the uncut version that I have as well.
Yeah.
And this is what is shown, basically this was what was added, because I don't believe this ending scene was not in the original book, that was cut down, I think, due to like budgeting at the time. They couldn't put all the pages and stuff in, so they had his editor had to cut it down a lot. And so when they were able to release this massive book with all of its pages, this was put into it. And so what we get is Randall Flagg, now Russell Verde, coming to this new land that we got one mention of in the final episode of him going there and becoming the god. So you don't know what could possibly happen there. And I liked it. I
loved it.
Left kind of a thing of, as someone else said, I think it was, I believe Michael Brown earlier in the chat was actually pointed out with this thing with Flagg ending up on the island, and then this thing with Frannie supposed to be having a whole bunch of kids and people having kids and stuff. Is this some type of thing where if we did get another season or a continuation, would it be something where it's like a jump in the future, like 20 years down the line or something, and we get another battle, another stand, as Randall Flagg or Russell has been building his civilization, and people in Boulder and other people building theirs. So I feel like it leaves it open to that, although this wasn't necessarily a new aspect because of the fact that this was originally Stephen King's original kind of wanting the way it to end with Randall Flagg. And so I'm showing right now a picture from the comic books of The Stand, which are very cool. If
I got to read those.
Want to look at some other ones. This is another version of that scene where Flagg ends up on this island. Now, the interesting thing, and it also is in the book, and not so, you don't really get a sense of that in this series, is that in the book and also in this comic that I'm showing, is that Flagg doesn't actually know who he is when he ends up on the island. He doesn't know who he is. He actually ends up on the island not remembering anything that happened in America, anything that happened in Vegas. He doesn't know who he is. He doesn't know why he's there. He just ends up coming to the conclusion, because he's evil or whatnot, that he could use this to his advantage and basically, take over these people in a way. And he says, my name, and I'm just reading from the book, don't worry, I'm not going to read a lot. He says, my name is Russell Frey. And he says, I've come to teach you how to be civilized, which of course is a play on the colonialism of the Western world and stuff. And this one, they made it say, worship me, which I guess plays a little bit more into his character throughout this series. But in this one, he didn't know who he was. He just knew that he ended up somewhere, and he was like, okay, it doesn't matter. He's like, who am I? He didn't know. Where am I? We did it. What did it matter? So basically at this point, he doesn't even have any memory. So he is actually reincarnated in a way. Which is interesting. It doesn't seem like they did it for this one, but in the book and in the comics and stuff, he actually doesn't remember he doesn't actually remember he was Randall Flagg at one time.
No, which I thought was great. And I love that we actually got a visual representation of that moment that I think fans of the original book have been waiting a couple of decades to read and watch. I thought that we didn't
get that in the 90s one. So it's kind of nice to get that in this one for people who are familiar with that part, although it's the end of the story, not necessarily a chance for a sequel. But we all know Stephen King does write sequels. He did a sequel to The Shining.
Yeah.
The Wonderful Dr. Sleep. So it's a chance that we may eventually get a sequel to The Stand, even if it may be just in TV form. So we can't really cut it off the whole thing. But I like that aspect of it, which, as someone said in the chat, Nick Paul, that it's a game of Risk or chess, where it never ends, the will and things like that. So we get the new Russell Verde. And Damon Robinson was asking in the chat, like, is the little girl in the book? From what my understanding is, she's not in this book. Little girl Abagail is not in the book. That was completely added in by Stephen King. And also what I was talking about when it came to Stu is that it's really in the book, it's Stu that kind of has this idea of talking about their future children and hopefully how their future children don't play with the toys that civilization played with, such as the atomic bomb and things like that, and will teach them not to do such things, kind of a deal. So it's actually Stu that kind of has this epiphany of what he'll tell his kids. And I thought that was really good. And we don't get that with this one. We get more of a focus on Frannie. And I personally would have liked for it to be maybe more of a focus on Stu, for Stu to finally have his moment to kind of reflect on everything that has happened to him as an everyday man. As I mean, like a working class Joe kind of guy, and what he thinks the new world is going to be in comparison to Glenn. Because in the book, he also talks about Glenn and what Glenn would have thought about, the new world and things like that. And we didn't get that. We got it from Frannie, which is fine, but I don't think it resonated as much because of the fact that of the role that Frannie kind of played, I feel like, or maybe the portrayal of her.
Yeah, I don't know. I know her character grew tremendously from, and maybe that's why she was given the monologue. And also, being 2021, we want to hear the woman's perspective instead of Stu's. But it would have been nice to hear both a little bit.
But this is what I mean. And I guess and this is so crazy that I'm making this kind of
I know, and I'm not.
As a forward-thinking woman, I'm a feminist, progressive and everything. It was the same thing I felt about them gutting it of its religious aspect. And I never thought I'd have to be doing that too. Yeah, I'm like, wow, y'all done gutted of the religion aspect. You done put this main character in the back burner and put this other character who you didn't really, I feel like you kind of shoved her down our throat a little bit too towards the end. And I don't think, I'm not doing it as on some conservative tip. I'm just doing it because I guess I'm saying it because I'm like, if you're going to do stuff like that, you got to have it so it strengthens the story. Don't do it just for the sake of doing it. Don't suddenly make Frannie the vocal point because, it looked like it's so progressive to make her the vocal point. Make her the vocal point because you built it up that it's justified that she'd be the one kind of having these thoughts and this reflection on society. Do it and build it up. Don't have us go through this journey of Stu and the role he was supposed to play, and then he never seemed to play any kind of role except Frannie's boyfriend. And it's like, what is that about? And I feel like if you're going to make the switch, you got to justify it. That's just good storytelling. And when you don't do it, you kind of make it, you really basically mess up the storytelling for those who know the book and just, what it could be overall. Right. So I just, that was my main kind of concern there. And it felt weird having to make that argument as a woman about wanting Frannie to why is Frannie the one getting to say so? I just felt like you have James Marster there. Why are you wasting him? You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was a little off. It almost reminded me in a way of the Hunger Games franchise in a way, but Katniss kind of earned everything, and she earned the, spoiler alert, she kind of earned everything that happened to her and her outcome, even though some people argue, how did she become a feminist warrior only to become barefoot and pregnant the entire time at the end? But that was, I guess, just on Katniss wanting to have a family and settle down after the whole country almost fell apart. But yeah, this didn't feel earned nearly as much because she went from a pill popping suicidal person trying to figure out what to do to somebody who really doesn't like the mentally challenged. And I would kind of argue maybe the writers, not Stephen King, but the writer of the show didn't like the mentally handicapped in this show, if they almost wrote out Tom entirely. I was just, it almost, and now I think this is the problem that this finale had from the rest of the show. The characters only showed who they actually could be in this one with Frannie and Stu. And it was just missing from the rest. And I know we're a broken record by now, but that's where I still stand.
Yeah, Damon Robinson in the chat is saying, I didn't see her grow. She seemed to be the same her. And then Give Me Shelter is pretty much agreeing with what I was saying of the fact that it was kind of like, if you're going to make changes, you got to justify it. It can't just be for the sake of looking like woke or whatever like that, which there's nothing wrong with those things. I love stuff like that when things get gender bent and all that other stuff, but you got to make it work. Or honestly, you just opening yourself up to trolls who basically say you changed it only for this reason and you didn't even make it good. It doesn't help, because then they can make the argument that doing stuff like that doesn't help when you do it. So you got to kind of balance it out, in my opinion. So I just really wasn't feeling that. So getting to the situation of the turtle. So the turtle, for those who don't know, was, I wrote this down. The turtle is part, he's the Motrin, which was interesting because Frannie actually asks Stu to pick up some Motrin, even though it's not spelled the same, but he's the Martrin. I think it's Motrin. And this is part of, the turtle represents one of the many people, one of the many beings from another universe or area or whatever, who help the world. And so what you have is, because for those of you who know Pennywise, he is actually a representative. He's not a Motrin, but he's actually a being similar to them in terms of, he's like the turtle brother or something, as the turtle represents his, like the turtle calls Pennywise his brother.
Oh, the turtle's not like the exact opposite?
He is, but when in the book, when he talks about Pennywise, when he talks about it, he calls him his brother.
Okay.
Yeah. So and Motrin, or the turtle, is one of, I think, 7 beings that help guard the beams of the will of the world and whatnot. So he's one of them. So it's a character that we see a lot, that comes across in the Stephen King universe, has made a few appearances. For those of you who watched the new It franchise 1 and 2, the turtle makes an appearance, I think, in the sequel.
Yeah.
As a toy. So the turtle is shown there. So the turtle makes an appearance. I think he actually makes an appearance in Dr. Sleep too, somewhere in there. But the turtle is something that's kind of this being that's kind of always there. This very powerful being.
In some religions, the turtle is symbolic to, it holds life on Earth on the back of its shell.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that was Stephen King's kind of idea of it. Give Me Shelter is saying, doesn't Martian, the turtle, represent the universe? I thought he vomited up the earth. Something like that. It's kind of hard to, I mean, depending on the origin of what Stephen King gives it, and like what Michael was saying, in indigenous cultures and other old world cultures, there's the explanation of the turtle. The turtle in some cultures holds the universe on his back. You know, like it's the whole world is on the turtle's back and stuff like that. But I think, and let me know in the chat and also in the replay comments, I think he's part of a group of beings that kind of do it. But maybe, I don't know, if I'm not exactly sure if Stephen King says that the turtle himself was the one that vomited up Earth. I'm not sure on that one. So that's the significance of the turtle, y'all. If you were wondering why there was a random turtle there, and it would make sense that it was in the episode that Stephen King was writing, that the turtle would make an appearance, and he does. And another difference with the book versus this one is that we mentioned it, was that I said the other difference was that, I was going to call her Maggie. I don't know why. The other difference was the fact that Frannie has a boy in the book and then later has a girl. So Frannie has a boy named Peter, which I think is named after her father in the book. And then later they have Lucy, who is her and her and Stu's biological child together, because we know the first child is with her and her ex-boyfriend who died when the plague came about. So that's a little bit of a difference. In this one, we don't see her pregnant again. We just know she's supposed to have 4 more kids. And in this one, it's a girl instead of a boy, and they name her Abagail.
Yeah.
Which I think is similar in the 90s version too, that she's named Abagail. Wasn't it a girl in the 90s version too?
Yeah, she had trouble breathing, and that's kind of how it ended. And I think like the whole peak of the epilogue of that was that Stu and Frannie were in the hospital worried about the fact that Frannie's original child from somebody else couldn't breathe because half of the parents weren't immune to trips.
Yeah. And Damon Robinson in the chat is saying they wasted a lot of actors in this. The guy that Flagg killed in the elevator would have made a great Lloyd. I thought so too. I thought that guy would have made a very cool Lloyd, but they went with a whole different direction for Lloyd in this one. Although towards the end, we did like Lloyd. Everything just seems so muted. Even when people died, it was like they died and we moved on. You know, not much mourning was happening with these characters that were supposed to be so significant in a way. And I don't know. I just felt like, I guess we're at the part where we talk about the overall thoughts of this show. And I am going to do a video, a more succinct video where I talk about some of the ways overall I feel like this series kind of went wrong with it. But I feel like overall for me, and let us know in the chat and also in the replay, this could have been epic and it didn't feel epic. I feel like that was my main issue with this. I feel like with the budget they had and some of the, special effects we saw and things like that they could have done a lot more and they didn't. And I think because of that, there were a lot of missed opportunities with this. Now, if there's a sequel to The Stand or something coming out, I might care. I might try to give it another shot because, hey, maybe if Stephen King is behind it, like others have said, I would care, to see what he was going to do with the sequel to his own story. But so far, I don't know if I trust wherever the main writers honestly would be taking this thus far. And I'm slightly disappointed. There were some gems in it. I don't think this is the kind of series where you can completely hate it, but I don't think this is the kind of series where you'd want to sit there and watch it all over again. To me, the 90s version is something I could watch once a year. I can come back to it and sit through the 4 hours of that show. Oh, not 4 hours. It was a little bit longer than that, actually.
8 hours.
8 hours. The 8 hours of that one. I could sit through it. But this isn't something I'd necessarily sit through all over again, knowing how subdued it felt. So I didn't hate it. I just didn't love it like I thought I wanted to. Yeah,
I really enjoyed aspects of it. I enjoyed elements. It very much was way too compacted, and I totally agree with you, Mr. Ben. Easily could have made this into a masterpiece of 3 to 5 seasons of Breaking Bad quality television, but it didn't happen. And I loved aspects of it. I loved elements, but just on the whole, it felt like every other remake of something we grew up with, where they have the power in the special effects. Kudos to the special effects team. I have a friend who works on the special effects team, and they did an amazing job. And you have all the special effects pumping into a much beloved story that is told by one of the best authors of our time. And once again, like all remakes, the emotion and the heart is taken out of it. It's like if a Steven Spielberg remake happened and Steven Spielberg only directed the last 15 minutes of the movie, only the last 15 minutes of this 2-hour movie are going to be good, that you're truly going to love. And I don't know if the original 90s miniseries was lightning in a bottle or not, but I prefer the older one overall. Even though I love the ending of this one better, I prefer the original.
Yeah, I think for me, I like I said, I enjoyed aspects of this, and I don't honestly think the '90s one is beyond reproach. That's why I was excited about this one, because I was like, here's a great thing where, you know, maybe they could have really done some even more with what, you know, it being the 2000s and updated technology and stuff and other actors. This could be really cool. And so I was open to it. I'm not one of those people who look at Stephen King adaptations and go in thinking this is going to be crap from the beginning. Like, I want to be entertained. I don't want to sit anywhere for a couple hours and not be entertained. That's a waste of people's lives. So for me, there were good moments, but you know, like others are saying, you know, this could have been a multi-season show. But even if it hadn't been, had they not gutted some of the stuff from this season, had they focused on characters other than Harold and Frannie necessarily, they could have done a sufficient enough job better than they did in one season. They could have done it. They had 9 hours to do it. If the 90s version can do it in 8, they could have done it in 9 hours of this one. The problem was the focus wasn't where it needed to be on this one. You know, Give Me Shelter is saying, agree with Damon Robinson. Lloyd and Glenn were wasted. Tom was underrated and underserved. I think they really did dirty to Tom. And I think that's a really, you know, Tom has a whole great backstory that they could have given. And he just became a footnote after he left Vegas. And I feel like that's a real disservice in this situation, because you have a character. I don't think mentally handicapped is the proper word to use for that.
I'm sorry if I used that.
It's okay. I just want to make sure people know, like, you know, that's, you know, I don't think that's the best word to use for it.
Maybe intellectually disabled might be the new
one.
No,
I don't know. Let us know in the chat. And also,
I apologize.
I'm going to call him, I think he's autistic. I believe that's what it is. So let's just, you know, say it that way, you know, and I think it was a real disservice, because you had a chance to show this character who's in a category that's not always represented in kind of ways. And they just kind of, and he actually is an important character. You had a source material where he's such an important character, and you let that fall flat in the year of 2021. So in parts where they were posturing to look progressive by putting Frannie in the front, they totally left this other character out who is, you know, who actually does have some real actual source material that you could have used, and he becomes a footnote. And the same thing with Nick. You have a character who is deaf and also, you know, partly blind and can't hear and things like that. And he's another footnote. And it was like, really? That's where we're at, you know.
Yeah, it got real ableist really quick.
Yeah, and I was like, that's kind of messed up for these characters, especially these great characters who actually have source material that you could have gotten. And like Sabetti is saying in the chat, yes, I agree. There was zero mourning. Penguin is saying, I never found out if The Rock survived. That was another thing. Teddy wondered, do you think The Rock survived? Maybe that's going to be in, as you said, The Stand, The Next Generation. Maybe we will find, maybe The Rock will make an appearance, because we don't get told that. And others are saying, Mr. Benji is saying, what made it so bad was we were promised this epic new coda, but all we got was Frannie falling down a well, which was good, but it wasn't epic. Exactly. We were promised something that was supposed to, you know, open up the world, the universe of The Stand. That's what we were told. And it was just kind of like, okay, here's this mini battle, this one last temptation that Flagg is trying to give to one of them. And, you know, that's it. Mr. Benji is also saying they even skipped over Tom and Stu coming home to Boulder. That was one of the major plot devices. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. There was a whole thing with Nick. So Betty is saying, I was about 25 years old for the 1993 version. People I knew were pretty tough on it because too much of the book was left out. Many felt they left too much out about Trash Can Man. Yeah. I could see that. That's why I'm saying I don't think the 90s one was perfect. I even complimented this version because of the fact there were certain things that they included from the book that the 90s version did not, that I was like, oh, that's pretty good. But then they gutted it of the other things that really matter. And I was like, no, that's not good. Vera is saying, yeah, a lot of the heart characters of the show were underserved. Yeah, you got Nick, you got Tom. I feel like Stu was a character we all could get behind, and he was kind of put on the back burner of this story, you know? Yeah. And yeah, I think it will be interesting to see how this 20 version ages. I honestly think give it another 2 to 3 years, they might do another version of it, they probably should, because I don't think I don't think this was all that great.
Yeah, I know King has a really good relationship with CBS, and they make really good programming too as far as sitcoms go. They're incredible. But I think that this should have been something that Amazon Prime got a hold of, or Hulu, or HBO Max, even Netflix. Like, I think one of the big streaming services should have gotten a hold of this instead of CBS.
Well, I don't even know on that tip. I mean, I think CBS could have done a decent job. I think it was just whoever way they approached this book. They had their faves. Whoever was adapting this version had their faves and characters, and that's what we got. Mm-hmm. And it was the wrong choice in terms of the faves. And no matter what studio, it really does depend on the people who are adapting the script, and I think that's where it kind of fell flat for me. No shade to the writers or anything like that, but yeah.
Yeah, it fell flat.
Yeah, so I guess if you were to give this series a grade, Michael, what would it be?
Ah, man, I would give it a B.
A B? That's pretty high.
Because I want to give it a C because it was average. Mainly because of you have Chekhov's gun, or Chekhov's crucifix, and you don't show that. And you cherry pick your religion elements in this, but you leave important ones out that kind of doesn't feel served. The newer things, I mean, like Flag or Far Away showing up. I don't even know if that's his name, but showing up in the jungle. I love that. But overall, and you don't even get Larry, Can You Dig Your Man in its entirety? I'm probably giving it, I'm seeing people in the comments, Price is Right, shouting at me, go, give it a C, give it an F. I think I'm going to give it a C. Okay.
Nick Paul is saying C. Mr. Benji is saying F. Mr. Benji got no, they're like, nah, this isn't an F. Vera is saying C. I'm going to go with a C minus. I'm going to say C minus. It's not an F. It's definitely not an F. There are episodes that are really quality. It's not an F. It's not so bad that it's even a D. I'm going to say it's borderline C and D, which is a C minus in my opinion. Damon Robinson is giving it a C plus. And so, I got to give it a C minus. For me, I just feel like they gutted it of the heart. Certain characters that needed more attention didn't get it. And it's not even one of those things where, I know if those of you who have seen my movie autopsy series so far, we've done The Shining as the last one. And one of my big issues with The Shining, Kubrick's Shining of The Shining, was that I felt like he didn't get the source material, and therefore his movie, although visually great, lacked the heart. And I feel like, funny enough, this one kind of does the same thing, where if you know the book, there's so much more they could have done. But even if you didn't know the book on this score, because I feel like if you didn't know the book of The Shining for Kubrick, you might actually be like, this is a great movie, right? But if you know the story that he got it from, you kind of okay, I got gypped of a better story than what Kubrick told. At least that's my opinion. With this one, I feel like the series, even if you didn't know the series and you were coming to this without knowing the book, you still feel gypped. And that's why I give it a C minus. Because some stories you could come in and it's okay, as a fan, they didn't put this thing in. I didn't like this because they gypped my character that I really want more of. But even as someone coming into it new, I would feel lost at some parts. I would feel like I was wondering, where is this story coming from? What is this stuff? And for it to be such an insular kind of story told that they did, insular meaning a lot of it would mainly be maybe Stephen King fans that would really like this. They kind of didn't give us what we needed either. So it's you kind of had to choose. Are you gonna please both fans? Or you're gonna lean towards this or that? And I felt like they didn't do either. So I'm gonna have to go with a C minus. We're getting a strong C plus. Give me shelter saying I'll give it a C, a solid 2.0.
That's fair.
Penguin is saying B minus, grading on a curve. What curve is that, Penguin?
And I understand that.
B minus, and you got to give me you got to give us an explanation on that one.
I'm not speaking for Penguin per se, but I almost gave it a B minus just because I enjoyed a lot of the performances. When the performances were written well, and I enjoyed King's addendum on the end of it, and I also enjoyed the visual effects in this. They did not cheap out on the visual effects department, so it was really good there. I thought about giving it a B minus, but my final definitely is just a plain C across the board.
Yeah, Zen is saying a D. And, Sabeti is saying what I was, talking about just a little bit earlier, which is I wonder if you can follow 2020 version going into it. And I honestly, and I've said this throughout our live streams, I don't think you can. I honestly, I can't, of course I can't unsee, or know the story, but I really wonder what people who had never knew anything of the 90s version, never watched the thing and was just like, oh, this is a cool new show with Alex Skarsgård and James Marsden, and I want to see what it's about. And would they be as enthralled as the rest of us were enough to push through? And I'm honestly going to say, I don't think so. And that's where my C minus is coming from with it. So,
if you look at it like Game of Thrones, like I've never read the books, you can go into that show watching it and understand what they're talking about. But this you can't.
Penguin is saying the curve is me having read the book, while Vera is saying the curve is Alex Skarsgård booty for me. Yes, that is the curve that lets you have it go a little bit higher. And Sveti is agreeing with me on the people going in code probably wouldn't really understand the story. I don't know who they were. Whenever you write a story, y'all, you got to figure who your audience is when you're writing it. If you can't figure out who you're writing a story for, whether it's a book, whether it's a movie, whether it's a script or whatever, think about who you want to get it.
Yeah.
If you can't do that, if you honestly don't know who your audience is, it's going to be all over the place.
And also, where is your story going to begin? And how much of your story do you want to tell? And what is important?
What is important and what do you want to get across? Because I just feel because they gutted this of the religious aspect and the spirituality, it kind of lost its point. And only got rectified when Stephen King came in to have Frannie give that speech and Mother Abagail give that talk to Frannie to remind you why the stand exists. Because had we not gotten that from Stephen King, you could have honestly, especially if you came into this code, not really understood what was the big picture of this all.
Yeah.
Because Stephen King came, and that's what the one thing I will say about this episode, because Stephen King came in and pointed it out to you, you got to understand it a bit more about the bigger picture. There never being an ending to a story. It's just a will that keeps going around and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've been...
JJ saying, I've been following a reactor on YouTube who hasn't read the book and they seem to understand it, even enjoying it. Yeah, so there's maybe some people who are digging it. I mean, I never want anyone to watch something and be miserable, to be honest. So, I mean, if people are getting something out of it, maybe. I do kind of wonder, because there were times when I was writing in my notebook where I was like, if I didn't know anything about the book, I would not understand why this was significant.
No.
Yeah, and like Vera is saying, and throwing the magic in at the end was weird. We only got bits and parts of supernatural aspects in this thing, and then they got a big part of the supernatural. Her straight up healing Frannie, like she's Abagail, Generation Z, Mother Abagail became Jesus. Like something she couldn't do before in her other body, but now she's a little girl and she's basically holding her hand over and knows that she can heal people. Where is this coming from?
Yeah, and
what are the rules of the universe?
And can we run into the cornfield and kind of like recruit her and give her a home instead of a tent out in the middle of a field? Like, this is somebody we should have on our team.
Yeah,
but I don't think she was 100% there.
She was magical Negro. That's what that was. Yeah. And that was my main issue with it. Like, she was totally just there to serve and save the white character. Like, okay. Yeah. So there was that. Okay, y'all. So keep letting us know in the replay what your thoughts were. And I guess my final question is, who is your favorite character in the whole series, Michael? And let us know in the chat who is your favorite character in the whole series, y'all. And I'll let y'all know mine.
Oh, the whole series.
For me, it's going to say Tom. Tom was my favorite character, and I didn't get enough of him. So maybe that's also why I had a low grade, because I really felt like they gypped him.
My favorite character, I really, really, really wanted it to be Flagg. However, I'm going to go with Teddy.
Okay.
Because
Teddy was great too.
He represented the humanity that died in this. And once Teddy died, that was it. But if Flagg was who he was throughout this whole thing, Flagg would easily have been my favorite character.
Mm-hmm. And I agree too. Had we had gotten the Flagg that we got in this episode, he would have been my favorite character, with the Tom being a close second.
Tom, yes, and Tom, of course.
Vera is saying Flagg. A lot of people are saying Ratwoman. Funny enough.
Yeah, right. She was in Vegas doing her thing.
JJ is saying Ratwoman and Floyd. And Sabetti is saying Larry, I think the actor did a great job. Yeah. And Give Me Shelter saying, I don't want a straight book adaptation, for example, Harry Potter, but the story has to satisfy both the book readers and those new to the universe. It felt very rushed, and I never pretended I was reading.
That's fair. I've read all the books, watched all the movies. Yeah. They leave stuff out, but new people can understand what's happening in Harry Potter.
Yeah, exactly. Penguin saying maybe Larry, even though he was covered more than the others, still not enough development. Yeah. Tom for Give Me Shelter. Second was Lloyd. So we got a lot of, I think it's the usual suspects and Kojak for me as a distant second, not even distant second, very close second for me.
Yeah, very close.
Yeah. So, all right. So we got our favorites, y'all. And I just want to say thank y'all for going through this journey with us, because I know I got comments in the replay section a lot where people are like, y'all still watching this? All right. Like and I kept saying, like, we're pushing through.
Yeah.
And I agree with Zen that Stu, though he was underused, Stu would have been my third fave had they really wasted James Marsden.
Yeah,
They really wasted him for this one.
Yes.
Glenn, he went out like a G and had a mega weed vape stash. That is what Damon said. Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
I've said Glenn almost every episode. I wanted to change it up, but Glenn wasn't in this one. But yeah, my boy Glenn, that probably would have been me. Yeah, if I wasn't Teddy.
Yeah. But yeah, thank you all for joining us on this journey. I'm always open to, if you all have suggestions for an upcoming horror or dark fantasy series that you think would be cool for us to cover, or for me to cover on this channel, just comment on one of the videos, or send a little message within YouTube, or you could check on the bottom here of these videos where you can reach me out on social media and give us a suggestion. I don't catch everything because there's so much content out there, and doing this Dan one was a lot of fun. I love slicing in the storytelling with you all, and doing this, of course, with Michael. So if y'all have some other ones, please let us know. For those of you who are watching WandaVision, me and my brother Damon, who's also in the chat, Damon Robinson, we do that every Saturday if y'all want to check that out. I was going to do Clarice, but I've decided not to, because I kind of want to see where that show goes, y'all. So I'm kind of going to give that some space before I start doing the Clarice show. But just please do, if you haven't already, subscribe, give a thumbs up to this video, comment in the replay if you come up with some more theories, and if you think there should be a season 2 or not, let us know. And overall, I just really enjoyed this. This was one of my first forays into doing a live every week for a show. And I really, really loved doing this with you all. So this was really great. And I also do Netflix ones, but it's kind of hard to do weekly Netflix because most people binge them. So I usually kind of can only give an overview of the thought, but if anyone's interested in spoiler discussion for certain shows, maybe we can do that or something like that. So let us know. Let me know in the reply comment section. I'll check those out and I'll give those a thought. And until then, thank you for getting creepy with us here.
Yeah.
And
thank you.
Yeah, everyone stay safe out there because we got our own plague going on. Yeah. So thank you all. Yeah, that spells stay safe. And Tom was gypped. Thank you all again. Have a great week, rest of your week.